Welcome back. We're examining the irony in a world that wastes so much food when so many are starving and discussing ways in which reducing that waste could have an impact. Joining us from London is Tristram Stewart, an English historian, food activist, freegan and author of a new book called Waste: Uncovering the Global Food Scandal, which is to be released in the US in October and already available in the UK and internationally. And from Rome we have Dr. Divine Njie, an agro-industries officer with the Food and Agricultural Organization. He's joining us from the headquarters there in Rome. We get back to our discussion. Actually, Tristram, there's a question I wanted to ask you. You were explaining your lifestyle, your decision on your lifestyle is a sort of protest. But in terms of advising people on what they can do as individuals to make any significant difference, what do you advise on how people might alter their lifestyles to make some kind of positive impact?
Well, as with all these things, reform starts at home. Here in the UK, it's been found that consumers waste about 25% of all the food they buy. So really one of the biggest things that we in the rich countries can do to alleviate this problem is simply look in the fridge. And when you go to shops, don't buy more than you're actually going to eat. Try and plan meals, do a shopping list. When you have leftovers, make sure you use them up. Really, really simple things. At the moment, food has become almost a disposable commodity in our culture. We're so distant from the land and from the ways in which food is produced and the impacts of that food production that we forget what a valuable resource it is. But let me just explain how I think that can have an impact on world hunger. You mentioned shipping food out to poor countries. That really is a bit of a misconstruction. At the moment, we buy and we trade food on an international market. So if you take wheat, for example, rich countries like Britain, North America, they buy wheat and they sell wheat on the global market. The extent to which we sell or buy is determined by how much we use and also therefore how much we waste. If we are wasting, as we are, millions of tons worth of food every year, then we are taking food off that market which otherwise would have stayed there. And that's the very same international market that people in Africa and Asia buy their food. And we are literally therefore taking food out of the mouths of the poor. It may not sound significant, but the food wasted in rich countries is up to 7 times greater than the entire amount of food required to lift all of the nearly 1 billion people in the world out of hunger.
Dr. Njie, we had an email that had come in from Pakistan, from Karachi. Kamran Munir from Pakistan wrote in saying, I used to live in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates, and I'm a witness of food wastage during iftar time in almost all of the mosques of the UAE. That's when the fast is broken in Islam. Now, if there would be some initiative to save this food for someone who is in badly need of it, I'm sure we could let people have some. What it raises really is the issue of how cultural habits must be hard to tackle in places where food is relatively plentiful. There's also the display of wealth through excessive setting of the table, food overflowing at the table. How much effort is made to try to educate people that the initial use of food is something that has to be more responsible?
Well, I think the issue here of awareness raising is a very important one, and not only in terms of educating people about avoiding waste, but also in terms of just getting knowledge about the issues that are involved in the wastage of food. If I go back to the post-harvest losses that I mentioned, creating awareness among producers and their collaborators within commodity chains is a very, very important aspect of the FAO's work, educating people, raising their capacity in various aspects of the post-harvest issue. So awareness raising, yes, is definitely an important action to take.
Now, Tristram, there's also the issue that modern lifestyles in the developed world involve a lot of eating out. There's a lot of restaurant culture now. I guess to some degree that the way that food is being handled from the middle classes and up is also different. And what impact are you seeing in terms of how food is wasted when it comes to restaurants, when it comes to people eating out, over ordering, and what might be done with that surplus food?
Well, one of the most inspiring things that I found whilst doing my research around the world on this book was in the Xinjiang province in western China, amongst the Uyghurs, where food waste really is taboo. I was sitting in a pulau restaurant. I'd finished my bowl of rice, and the restaurateur had sat down and was starting a conversation with me. And I noticed that instead of talking to me, he was looking into my bowl and scowling. At the bottom, there were 3 or 4 grains of rice, and he pointed at each of them and said, "Clean," and made me clear up my rice. I'd really been beaten at my own game there. Now, throughout the culture of the Uyghurs, there are measures taken to avoid waste. Not only are you expected to finish every scrap put in front of you, but when you go to a restaurant, you actually are asked whether you want a quarter, half, or full serving. So it becomes very difficult actually to order more than you need. And this is something that we in the Western world often forget. In America, a supersized portion is often put before somebody who has no chance of getting through it all. It's a very simple thing to be able to say, well, I'd like a smaller helping, please. Or at the end of a meal, if you have leftovers, just to ask for what we call a doggy bag, a bag to take the food home and eat it the next day. That would save everybody money, and it would also mean that the food actually gets eaten. So the kind of solutions are really not very complicated. It's just about, as Dr. Njia said, a culture change, about raising awareness of the issues involved, of the value of food. I mean, in the Western world, our food production and our demand for food is one of the main drivers behind, for example, deforestation in South America. We chop down the Amazon rainforest, or we pay the Brazilians to grow soya and to grow meat, which is then exported to Europe, and then we throw a great deal of it away. And I calculated that the land required to produce just the meat that is wasted in the United States and in Britain is equivalent to about 8 times the amount of Amazon rainforest that was destroyed in Brazil over the last 12 months. So the level of the problem is enormous, but the solutions are relatively simple.
Well, South Africa's on the line. Ruben, glad you could join us on the phone. What would you like to ask?
Yes, sir. I need to question one factor. There's a lot of food that's actually being wasted in South Africa as well by stores and so forth. Whereby we are running I'm a secretary of an organization that's assisting the destitute and underprivileged people. That's been founded and chaired by a Sri Lankan Muslim for the past 11 years. We go by and ask stores, please assist us with whatever you have left over. Not that what's expired, but what's going to be expired in a day or so. But we find these people did not assist us at all. Those things are thrown into bins.
Okay, actually, let me just put this to Tristram about how you found the resistance you found perhaps in approaching organizations to actually changing things. You said you had some luck with bread, for example, but do you find overall there is a receptive attitude towards preventing food wastage?
Things in Britain are changing very rapidly and for the better. We still have a very, very long way to go. But 5 years ago, when I was also campaigning on this issue, most of the supermarkets in Britain, for example, would not participate in any meaningful way with just the kind of redistribution organisation that we've just heard about in South Africa. There's an organisation here called Fair Share. It redistributes food, it takes it from manufacturers and supermarkets and takes it to the needy. Now, it's a very simple thing. In fact, it saves those supermarkets money for the disposal cost to donate this food, and yet they still weren't doing it. Fortunately now, most of the major chains in Britain are at least in dialogue with Fair Share and other redistribution organisations, but there's still only a very small proportion of the food that they waste that actually gets given to them. If you go to the United States, where food redistribution is taken as an expected action from the big retailers, there's a nationwide scheme called Feeding America, and there are lots of other small food banks, they're called, where people who are in need can go and pick up food. It's a very simple thing. You have surplus food before it goes past its expiry date, and it gets given to people who need it. It's such a simple thing to do, and throughout the world, obviously, that is one of the things that can be done to relieve both hunger and also food waste.
Okay, we've got Wesley in New Hampshire. Let's squeeze that in quickly. Wesley, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, I want to ask that, is it true that if people eat less in America, do we think that can solve hunger in Africa?
Okay, Dr. Njie, we literally have about 30 seconds. Do you feel that if the West consumed less, that it would help places such as Africa?
No, I wouldn't really subscribe to that claim. I think the issue is not as simple as has been pointed out. We're dealing with lots of complicating factors here.
Right.
Urbanization, for example. 50% of the population in Africa.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
please.
I'm sorry. I have to stop you only because we're about to lose our satellite time. I do thank you very much, and Tristram as well, for joining us. We will try and get back to this debate at some stage. I thank you, our viewers, for taking part with your questions. And remember, you can follow the program on iTunes. This week, it's our discussion on Israel's nuclear capabilities. On the next Riz Khan Show, sexual taboos in the Arab world. Is society changing because of outside influences, or are traditional values still intact? From me and the team, we'll see you next time.